So Austin bought some new seals for these heads, and we're putting the seals on. These seals are actually all one piece like we discussed before. And I measured these. These are the seats and the other one. Then they had a separate seal. I measured the thickness of those, and there's only 0.6 difference. Now, they come with this handy dandy little tool
I've not been using
that you slip over the top, and it just keeps you sealed from hanging on that groove. But now you're really supposed to get the retainer and the locks on. You can get a tool on here and measure your installed height to make sure that you're getting the springs in the right installed height. But these, a lot of people just throw these springs in here, and that's what he's doing. I got that tool, but he's just gonna throw it together. But also another thing, if you got like a really high lift cam, you want to put the retainer and lock and measure the distance it takes the lock and retainer to hit that seal, and make sure that's bigger than the lift of your cam. Also, you want to do that, you want to put the head on the car and put the piston at top dead center and see how much travel you got before you hit the piston also, and measure that and make sure that that's greater than the lift of your cam, plus plus a little extra, just, you know, for wiggle room, like 50 thousandths or so. Or yeah, 50 thousandths or so, I think is what most people do. But he's just going to throw those on there and throw the springs on there. I mean, I don't think that cam, it's a 585 lift and like a 228 duration or something. It's sloppy stage 2 cam. Whatever it is, it's not big enough to do any of those interferences, I don't think. But yeah, we'll throw new seals and put the springs that came with the sloppy stage 2 cam. They were originally on these heads that we put on those. Yeah, there was. Yeah, there was. That's Brandon's motor. And then we put on these heads, or no, they actually went from those heads to the LS1 heads, and then we put them on the 799 heads, and now they're going back to the 862 heads. But yeah, we're going to do that. And that
musical chairs. That
motor that he bought, the crank's got a little bit of rust. I think you can wipe it off with your finger. But if not, we got some 320 grit Emery cloth that he's gonna kind of hold it as I spin the crank, just with some light pressure, keep light pressure applied. And we're gonna clean that up a little bit. And then after that, we're gonna take the rear cover and the balancer off. And then we're gonna take the front cover, the timing chain, and the cam out of it. And then we go ahead and put the cam back in it. And then we're going to hone the cylinders, and then we're going to gap some rings. That's what's on the agenda today. And then once we get the springs in this, we're going to set them up on a flat surface and fill the chambers up with transmission fluid like we did on those, and make sure they don't leak. If one leaks, we'll take it back apart and lap it a little bit more, but I think they're good. I think these are going to seal good. But if you guys are wondering more about the spring installed height and how to measure that and shim that, it's pretty much the same as when I did Christopher's car. So I do have a video on that. If you want to go back and look at that, I'll put the link in the description. Plus I'll put it as one of the end bookmarks. Is that what they're called? At the end of this video. I just filled this one up with transmission fluid. I just want to see how good it seals. And then he gets we got the springs and everything on this one. He gets the other one done. We'll set it right there. Do the same thing. So these cleaned up pretty good with just a rag. And we're just taking like a 320, 400 grit Emery cloth and going like that. This one was pretty bad, but it's already cleaned up really good. Just to try to keep even pressure on it.
I'll pull it back up like this, but right there I can't see.
And just enough to knock the rust off of it. Try to stay even across through there. Yeah, that'll work. That's fine. See what this one looks like. But yeah, that's what we're doing.
There's a little bit on that one. It's easier if I do it
See.
too, because I know how much pressure I'm putting on it.
And then you just
That's
over. I was spinning it for him. And just keep steady pressure on that. And go back and forth. Back and forth. These were good, but we decided to do it anyway. I mean, they all come out really good. That one was really, really bad rusted. But yeah, look at there. You kind of, when you pulled it out of there,
Oh, right
you
there.
made that line right there. Well,
You want me to go over?
you just gotta watch when you pull it out of there.
You want me to do it again?
No, that's fine. Be all right. That's what we're rolling with.
There's still a little bit of line.
Now we're gonna take the balancer off. That's always fun. And then
Especially on one that's been on our 300,000 miles.
we're gonna take the front cover off, and then we're gonna emery cloth the cam where it got the cam a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and put the cam back in, in it. And then when we get the main and rod bearings should be here tomorrow, we'll lift the crank out and put the main bearings in it, torque it back down. We're going to reuse the main bolts. We got new rod bolts, stock bolts, and then we'll start putting rods and pistons. Well, after we get the crank out, we're going to hone it. Just with I don't know what I did with the hone, but y'all see it here in a little bit. But once we get the crank out, then we'll hone it. Then we'll gap the rings. And then we'll put the bearings back in, check the in play. We're going to use plastic gauge. I wish I had a bore, multimeter, and all that. Multimeter.
I was like, what are you talking about?
I always forget what they're called. A bore. Yeah.
One of them doodads?
Yeah, one of them bore doodads, and
Where's
a
my
micrometer, bore micrometer, and a micrometer to check all these, just so we know exactly what the clearances are. Because if you're running a boosted application, it's better to run more clearance. Like I think stock's like 0.0015 to 0.002, and that's a tight clearance, so you use the thinner oil. But when you run like a 0.003 or 0.0035, then you run like a 20 W50 oil. You got to run a thicker oil when you got them bigger clearances. But them bigger clearances do better under a boost, from what I understand. If I'm wrong, you guys correct me. But yeah, that's where we're at. All right, I got the crank cam and everything out of this one. So I think we're done fooling with them tonight. I was over here messing with this. Austin, they had a T4 flange welded onto the T6 flange, and his new turbo's a T6. So he spent most of the day over there cutting that off.
Never again.
And I've just been BSing and taking this one apart. And then next step is to hone the cylinders out. Just give it a light hone job with the ball hone. And then gap the rings. Start putting them back together. But it's Saturday night. The bearings and stuff won't be here till Monday or Tuesday. We oiled that up so it don't rust. Got all the main caps set in the order they came out. And yeah, once we get all the parts in, we'll start putting it back together. Well, it's the next day on the heads holding fluid. And they're holding fluid good. Alright, so I'm sitting here taking this LS1 the rest of the way apart. And I noticed these bearings, they're misshaped. They don't even fit back into the rods correctly. My guess on this is that all the oil went back to the pan. It got starved for oil. The bearings got hot and locked on the crank, and then all hell broke loose. We didn't have the dipstick all the way down in the dipstick hole. And we actually overfilled it a quart. I think that's what saved it. But this time we fixed the old dipstick tube when we did the heads, and we only had it at 5 quarts. When you accelerate this hard on these motors where that oil pickup's right in the middle of the motor, it's a terrible idea. it starves the motor for oil, and that's my guess what happened. That's just a guess, though. That's the best guess I can come up with. But that's a terrible design. I didn't even know about that. A couple of people had told me about blowing up motors because of that dipstick pickup, that oil pickup in the middle of the pan, launching at the drag strip. All the oil goes to the back of the pan, then it doesn't pick up the oil. Luckily on mine, even though I didn't even know about it, I got one of those eBay pans that have the pickup in the rear. So, but that's my guess. Tell me what y'all think in the comments below. But I'm going to take this. I think the crank is still salvageable. I'm going to take the crank out of it and put it in this other 5.3 we have sitting over here. And I mean, these are Gen 3 rods. See, they don't have the dimple on them. And it looks like they got a line right there too, but I don't think anybody would want the rods, but I mean, pistons still look good. I mean, that one's got a little dent in it. I don't know. I'm mainly after the crank. I think the crank is still good. But yeah, that's my guesstimate on what happened. I think all the oil went to the back of the pan. We only have 5 quarts in it. It started for oil. It got these bearings hot, and they grabbed hold of the crank, and then all hell broke loose. That's my guess. What do y'all think? Hit the comments. So somehow it's knocked that counterweight crooked. It's rubbing against there. It turns over smooth until that counterweight hits that spot. And then it's hard to turn. You can see where it's hitting. I thought first maybe the cap was not crooked, but it's not. It's the counterweight on the crank. So this thing's burnt. Whole thing's burnt. There's cracks in pistons. There's cracks in rods. It's burnt. And look at that bearing. It was definitely starved for oil. So, and those bearings, they don't fit right in the caps. They're like swole up where they don't fit right. So I'm pretty sure he accelerated too hard. We didn't have enough oil in it. All the oil went to the back of the pan, and it starved for oil. The bearings got hot, clamped on the crank, and then it broke a rod. So that whole thing's junk. It's going to go to the scrap yard. Shouldn't even have pulled the pistons out of it. But anyway, so I went ahead and took that crank out of the LS1 because I thought maybe just the block was distorted, and sure enough, it turns over good. And the one that we're going to use, it's still got the saddle bearings in there. I just dropped it in there, and it turns good. But you can see, I can catch that with my finger. It did eat up the bearings. Worse on the mains than it did the rods, actually, especially that one. So that crank would probably have to be turned too, but I think it's still good. It's got some ledge where it hit something right there, so I'd have to file that down, but I still think it's usable. Machine shop would have to look at it. But yeah, it was just rubbing where that block, you can see clean through it. It just distorted the block and was causing it to rub. I thought maybe it just took out the thrust bearing, was causing it to rub. But yeah, we'll lube this one up and tag it and set it over in the corner and maybe use it one day. Maybe a machine shop can do something with it. And then here's the difference between the Gen 3 and Gen 4 rods. The Gen 3's here, Gen 4's over there. They're thicker and wider.
A little hard to get them close, but
yeah. Well, you could put the piston on top of the other one so you can get them side by side. There you go.
still close to get. But
Yeah. Thicker and wider. There is a pretty big difference.
either way, send it.
All right, we got the LS1 out of the way. Just put it on the side of the house. It's going to the scrap yard. Now we're going to hone some cylinders. We already got Vaseline in these, but I'll also spray some PV blaster oil or transmission fluid or whatever on the ball hone here. And then when you do this, you don't want the drill to be going stupid fast. About right there. And when you go, you don't want the drill, you don't want the hone to stop inside the cylinder. So you start. Even strokes. So I do a few strokes like that, and then I reverse it and do the same thing. Make sure you're going all the way up and down. Just like that. That should be enough for that. And then spill everything. And then wipe it out with a rag and see what it looks like. You should have good hatch marks going back and forth, crossing over each other. Alright, we got all the cylinders honed out, and we put a coat of oil in there so they don't rust. And then we gap the rings. Now, on these rings right here, you got a top, middle, and a bottom. This is your oil ring on the very bottom. And then top ring's your compression ring. I forgot what this one's called in the middle. But anyway, don't get these mixed up. The top one needs to stay in the top, and the middle needs to stay in the middle. Also, there's an up and down on these rings. So when you take them out, you might want to mark the top of them with a marker right on the ledge or something. You need to put them back in the exact way they came out. But now you can carefully take these out. I make a tool for this. Like this. It's kind of hard to do with one hand. And just rotate it around and it'll pop off. Just like that. And again, this is the top side of the ring. That's the bottom side. They need to go back in the way they came out. So keep in mind of that. And then Austin took a broken ring off of one of the LS1 pistons and scratched in there and used brake cleaner to clean it out. But now, go off the cylinder. See, that one's number 8. I don't know if you can see that or not. And this is the top of our ring. We're not going to get that mixed up. But looking at the front of the motor, 1357, 2468. So we're on 8. So we just put this in here like this. And you can use the piston. If you take both rings out, it'll push down in there farther. But use the piston to get it straight. And then you find your gap right there. You just use a filler gauge and you measure that gap. I think he said he put them at 28. That's what we put the top and the middle ring at. There's a 28 right here. And you just check it like that. See? It goes through there. Now if that gap ain't big enough, I think 26 thousandths is fine on this. What I did was I took it and I held it in my hand and I squeezed it on that file right there. Just a flat file. I can't do it with both hands, or maybe I can. I just squeeze it on the file like that and then move the file up and down like that. And do it for a little bit, check it, do a little bit until you get it where you want. And then, you know, do your second ring. But again, there's a top and a bottom to these rings. Usually they'll be beveled. They'll have a bevel on them. Like the new rings, they'll usually have a marking on the side that needs to go to the top, but it's kind of hard to see that on these rings. they do need to go back in the exact way you come out. Up facing up, down facing down. The first ring back in the first groove and the second ring back in the second groove. But that's how we did that. And we'll get some more parts in tomorrow, and we'll start putting it back together. But y'all like and subscribe and have a great day.